One may as well be the definition of the mad scientist subgenre of horror. The other is a refreshingly modern take with themes of gaslighting, manipulation, and abuse. The Invisible Man. They Remade It. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
We come to you slightly more demure for this last of our Halloween season, simply because the both of us are seemingly not feeling too well, because at least for me, it's usually because the weather shifts. So, if we're a little sniffly, we apologize.
There's also viral infections and stuff going around. I had COVID for the first time.
Oh, no.
I guess it was the week before last, so like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, shit, I'm sorry. I didn't even know.
It's just that and pneumonia and like the entire region is like locked up with that shit right now.
Yeah. For me, I don't think it's anything viral for me. I think I just, like, my allergies and sinuses are just kind of weird. Like, just last week, I had to deal with a migraine that just kind of came out of nowhere. Pushed our recording back, in fact, because of that. But, so it's my usual, obviously, of talking about, like, either the weather or not feeling necessarily super well, but this time around, we have a more distinct, a more distinct purpose to it of just, like, yeah, no, it's actually kind of rough right now. So
Things are going on.
But
as they say, I guess.
I guess. But in your COVIDified stupor, were you able to watch anything in your, I guess, well, maybe not necessarily quarantine, but, in whatever amount you were able to take off?
Yeah, an unbelievable amount of just Halloween garbage continuing from what I had already talked about briefly in the Scooby-Doo episode, just sort of all over the place. In that regard. I was able to, when I wasn't sick, I was able to go to the theater and catch that new The Smile 2, the sequel to The Smile that no one asked for.
Yeah.
Slightly more interesting than the first one, just because it's a unique setting, I guess, for that kind of horror movie, but just overall, they still don't really do it for me. Don't stick the landing. It's the same. We're overwhelmed with this modern take on horror that doesn't really go anywhere, and they all rely on the same themes, tropes, story beats that just sort of drive me crazy. And at the end of the day, the main takeaway is that just a lot of them don't have the courage to go the extra mile in their horror storytelling. And it sucks that at the other end of that is pretty much the prestige horror film, which we have been over inundated with for the past decade, so that's been getting stale as well. Horror's not in a great place right now. There have been things that have come out that I've liked, but it's everything sort of has its peaks and valleys, and I think we're in a bit of a valley.
Yeah. It feels like there's been a bit more, at least, effort on display for horror lately, which has at least been nice. It's been to middling effect, obviously, in most cases. But it does seem cool that people are actually trying to be like, hey, what if we put, like, some actual, like, production value behind some of these and try to do something with it, like between, like, things like Barbarian, and I was a big fan of Late Night with the Devil. Not necessarily the highest budget thing in the world, but I thought it was kind of cool.
No, it was pretty low budget, but yeah, I really loved that. I remember because I got to see that in the limited theatrical run. I think I talked about it on the podcast.
You did, yeah.
But that and In a Violent Nature both came out this year, and I liked both of those. So I'm not saying that we are devoid of any entertainment,
but it is nice to see, like,
but yeah,
there's this desire of, like, it's clear these are directors who grew up watching horror movies and things, are like, I want to do my own thing of it, but I want to put some effort behind it, which is, like, at least admirable, even if it doesn't necessarily come out well.
I appreciate it to a certain extent. And
for instance, Hereditary, which we actually watched recently.
Oh yeah. That's why I was saying, keeping on the train of the horror. The other things that I've watched that I was going to mention have just been our ongoing movie night things, which for October we've been doing the sort of Halloween horror or horror adjacent sort of things. And I don't have much else to say on Hereditary, I don't think, that I didn't already say back when I first watched it. So
Yeah.
I will primarily let you take the reins on that. But I did want to bring up the most recent, which was literally just a watch between me and your fiance.
Sorry,
But
which I sat out because my social battery was extremely drained that night. So
mine was to an extent, just because that entire day was a wedding. But I actually got home surprisingly early. Early is relative, but I was like, yeah, okay. I just laid in bed and watched it on my phone,
yeah.
which is funny because the stream was breaking for her on Discord whenever she took it to full screen. So I was watching it on my phone inside of a Tubi window. So it was like an extra layer of
This is
abstraction there.
yeah, this is early 2000s pirating shit, man. This is how God intended it to be watched.
Yeah, this is how I watched the Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis
Oh my
a
God.
couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's true.
Because that was bizarre. But anyways, beating around the bush far too much unintentionally. But we watched a stop motion effort, Blood Tea and Red String, I think is what it was called. Very interesting piece. It's about
Hannah gave me
70 minutes.
Hannah gave me some like snippets from it. The main thing I took away from it is just at one point I hear from the other room her go, "Was that Sonic the fucking Hedgehog?"
That was very early in the movie, like a blue thing crossed in the screen, I think, and I couldn't even register it as a hedgehog. I had no idea what it was.
She
But
mentioned like an egg hatched. Didn't it look like a hedgehog? It was Sonic the Hedgehog coming out of it or something.
oh, that it didn't really look like Sonic to me.
I mean, like I'm just
It
saying,
was like
tell
a
you what I heard.
xenomorph. Yeah, but it's interesting enough, but it's in that sort of vein where it's the artistic sense of taking, how far can we take an idea of dark fantasy in a dialogueless setting, which is difficult to do, and I think the film does okay with it. It's not perfect, but you can see that it's trying for ideas, and I think it conveys the story really pretty well. It's just the story is batshit insane for no reason whatsoever, so it having no dialogue doesn't help.
Right.
The worst offender to that degree is another stop motion movie I talked about on the show, Mad God, that came out from director Phil Tippett,
Oh
which was
yeah.
basically just like an hour and a half MTV music video. And I was like, okay, I have no idea what's going on, and it's cool to look at, but there's nothing to grasp onto here whatsoever. At least I understood what was happening here. It was just I didn't really get it. It's like, okay, so these royal looking mice who don't work for anybody, even though they're dressed up like royal guards, but I guess they're their own kingdom, contract these squirrel crow creatures to build them a weird doll for questionable motives. The creatures fall in love with it and refuse to pay the mice because they're going to keep it, you see. So the mice break into the squirrel crow's house and they steal it. And so the movie is a journey for the squirrel crows to make it to the den of the mice and recapture their beloved doll queen. However, halfway through that, there is all the egg business, and so the doll gets destroyed. And so one of the mice takes it away. Basically, it's weird because it doesn't go anywhere, and you think it's going to be this journey about these squirrel crow creatures on a quest to save the doll they love so much. But they never even make it to the mice's hideout because they learn, oh wait, they got sick of the doll because like an egg hatched and ruined it, so they like took it back to the tree. I guess we'll turn around. So it's like, okay, I'm glad all that happened. That was pointless. It was just weird. I didn't really. I understood the story. I just didn't understand why the story was happening the way it was.
Yeah. That definitely seems like a passion project thing that someone just had like in their head of like, I'm just gonna do this, you know?
It was, and I can't pull the director's name from the top of my head, but if you look at her filmography, she has a bunch of other shorts, like short features prior to this film, and most of them seem related. So I'm like, okay, so is this like a world that you've been crafting for a while, and you're like, okay, finally, I'm gonna make a movie that takes place in my fantasy world? Because I always got the feeling that that's what Tippett was doing with Mad God too. Like, this is my grungy, edgy, liquid television world that I've created, and now I'm gonna make a movie in it.
This is
So
her just wanting to make like her Fern Gully, the Untold Stories or something.
yeah, but with no,
Sorry, no, the Rats
I
of
don't want to
Nim,
say
not
no.
Fern Gully.
Okay, I was gonna say, I was like, well, I guess Nim has messaging too. It's just not beat you over the head with the message like Ferngully is. This movie doesn't seem to have a message really, but I'm sure any number of pseudo intellectual literary scholars could read something into it. I mean, you can read into anything if you try hard enough. But yeah, that was that movie. Um, I'm just gonna pass the ball over to you. I'm gonna throw it over the fence.
Yeah, sure. Um, I've kind of had a weird mix of things this time around. Haven't really had much chance to watch movies outside of the movie nights. For like to start with though, for at least on that end, I'll talk about Hereditary a bit. Um, I kind of already known bits of the story of it before going into it, which probably kind of undid some of the mystery for me. But at the same time, that didn't really seem to change a lot of my feelings towards it, which was like, okay, that was freaky. Um, but it's hard for me to really put it into words beyond that because obviously the whole thing of it being a big messaging of like inherited trauma and that sort of thing. Um, I don't know. It's just I didn't really expect it to go the route that it did. I fully okay. Uh, I guess to clarify my thoughts on this, I fully thought this was going to be more of kind of like a more cerebral movie where we wouldn't necessarily have direct answers to everything. Like we'd have like maybe nods to the fact of like, okay, it looks like someone did this with some demonic force or whatever, and that probably has something to do with it, but we never get a clear answer. But this one actually just kind of came out of in the second half, especially, really just kind of went, no, here's a pretty direct setup of what's happening, and I was like, oh, okay. I don't know if that makes it more or less scary. I think it honestly kind of made it less because I was like, okay, there's a process here, and so a process means there's some amount of sense. But I don't know. I think just by the end of it, I was so stressed out that I was just like, I'm glad I watched this movie, and I'm glad it's over. Also, so um, I think that's a sign of a good horror movie. Then, but yeah, I was surprised with the direction it decided to go. I figured it'd be a bit more kind of like, oh, what does it all really mean? But it was like, no, actually, here's what it means. Here's what's going on. I'm like, okay, cool, moving on. Um, which I can at least appreciate. Sometimes I get kind of tired of the ones where it's like, oh, what could have all meant? I was like, I don't know, man. You spent 2 hours with this shit. Why? I wish you would have told me. So,
Yeah,
um,
or the ones that don't want to commit, and it's like it's up to
yep,
your interpretation. Like that has its place, but I'm tired of it. So
yeah.
let's take a
Or
break from
or
that.
the opposite end of the spectrum of I'm going to keep making bullshit, and you guys are going to build my lore for me, which is the Five Nights at Freddy's model. So at least it didn't go that route. Um, but yeah, beyond that, I haven't actually had a whole lot of time or slash inclination to watch a whole lot of stuff. I've of all things, I've actually been watching a. I'm trying like it is a Sherlock Holmes TV series from the '80s from the BBC. Um, which I can't remember the name of the main actor in it. Um,
I feel like we've talked about him before. It's funny because you mention it, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what the show is, and I can't remember the name. But for some
uh,
reason, I think that we've discussed it because we've covered the actor.
I believe so. Maybe the main actor is Jeremy Brett, who plays Sherlock Holmes. Um,
Nope.
yeah,
That does not sound familiar. I was hoping it
the
would.
and the name of the show, like it's got a few different series connected, but the main one that I've been watching it's The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which is almost it's basically just straight TV adaptations of a lot of the like stories from Arthur Conan Doyle. Um, and honestly, I've actually been really enjoying it. It's a much different take on all the modern versions of it, where Sherlock's meant to be kind of like just this effectively social asshole, especially the Sherlock series, which I've come to loathe as time goes on for more and more reasons. And this one, meanwhile, Sherlock is definitely more of a kind of a social weirdo. Like he doesn't quite fit in with things, but he's also shown as competent and that people do like him. And also, he's just kind of happy. Like when he's doing stuff, he's like, at one point, you know, he's talking to a client, and Watson walks in and is like, "Oh, sorry, I'm interrupting." And Sherlock goes, "No," and he literally hops over like he does a full like small jog and then hop over a couch to welcome him in the room. It's like, oh, this guy's great. He's got like actual energy and shit that isn't just like, you know, whatever the fuck Benedict Cumberbatch has going on. And plus, it's kind of got that quaintness that comes with 1980s shows, especially British TV shows. And so nothing ever feels too terribly threatening. So it's like, okay, I can just put this on during work, and it's just very interesting. And so it's just kind of fun. And I didn't realize I could, because I do actually really like Sherlock Holmes as a character and as a series. I just haven't really liked a lot of the interpretations in this century. So it's a it's been a surprising little thing to just kind of have going on in the background. Like every episode's on YouTube at this point, so it's been easy enough to find. I just had to, they're all put up in random orders, so I just had to find a episode list and just have those in the right order. That's all.
Well, I'm glad you're having fun with old British things.
Of all things, yeah. It's one of the few things the British produced that I was like, yeah, I'm cool with this. Um, Beyond that, I've mainly just kind of filled my time with just a smattering of games that I've decided to be playing. Not too long ago, Frostpunk 2 came out, and I've been playing that off and on. Um, there's one I've been replaying, which is still kind of in early access. It's called Void Train. I don't know if you heard about that one.
I think I have, but it's probably from you.
Honestly, probably. It's basically just like if you've heard, like, there's that one game Raft, I think it's called. Like you're literally just on a raft in the ocean. Very similar premise of you're. Well, I guess when I say the premise out loud, it's weird. But you're on a train that's going through the infinite void, and you have to collect resources from around you, and then you have to build up the train as a result. Like that's basically the crux of it. There's not a whole lot else going on with it right now, and I kind of wish they do something with it because it's fun. The design is really cool, and I just like the concept. It's like, okay, cool, trains. I'm a train kid. I can dig this. But
trains,
just otherwise,
more
just
trains.
exactly. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot going on with it, and it's been released for well over a year, maybe even two at this point. So I don't really know where they're going with it. Otherwise, a little bit of the game that keeps bringing me back, Timberborn, which is just a city builder with beavers.
You've mentioned it multiple times on the show before, and
yeah,
I noticed you went back into it recently. I was like, oh,
yeah, they recently did a big update recently, so I've just been kind of having fun with that. And then I think just honestly, I've just kind of been playing whatever just kind of suits my fancy. Nothing's really been grabbing me lately. I started playing Power Wash Simulator again. That kind of shows you where I'm at.
I like those mindless.
Yeah,
games. I completed that game twice on two different platforms just because it's so easy to just put on a podcast and mindlessly watch things when you're behind.
And I've been just kind of powering through that one. But there's that. I've been playing some more Dead Cells, which is a thing I play off and on a lot, which I'm probably just gonna drop just because I don't know what the fuck to do. It's one of those games where it's like, oh, how you progress into the actual ending of the game. So do this really hard game. Okay, now beat that. Now it's a roguelike, so now you have to go through it, but at an even harder setting, and you have to do that 5 times. Like, I really got through the bare bones baby setting. I'm not gonna keep doing this. This sounds dull as dirt. So I'll probably not play much more of that. And beyond that, I think that's basically it. The past few weeks have been weird as far as content goes for me. I just haven't been able to grip on anything, and I haven't really been motivated to watch a whole lot. So it's been a busy month, let's say. So I've done my best with it, but that's about it.
You've had fun with your beavers and your frostpunks and your trains.
Yeah. That kind of, honestly, those 3 games kind of sum up my personality. I'm going to be real. It's Frostpunk being steampunk shit, Void Train being trains, and then Timberborn being, well, beavers.
Beavers? Okay.
honestly, just like they're my favorite animal. So.
Oh, cool. I should insert that ad into the podcast. It's like fast trains, slow trains, smoking trains, even trains that blow through snow.
You just threw me for a loop with that one. I was like, oh my god, my brain. Believe it or not, a thing I did not own. I should have owned that, but I never did.
That is a shame.
I mean, before my brain goes down further rabbit holes here, shall we get to the show that what we're meant to be doing?
Oh yeah, I forgot. We also watched movies for this week, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I don't know.
Okay,
I couldn't see it. It's the Invisible Man. So, kicking off with the 1933 film of The Invisible Man, directed by James Whale, screenplay by R.C. Sheriff, awesome name, and it is based on the original 1897 novel by H.G. Wells of the same name. Its cast is made up of Gloria Stewart as Flora Cranley, Claude Rains as Dr. Jack Griffin, William Harrigan as Dr. Arthur Kemp, Henry Travers as Dr. Cranley, Una O'Connor as Jenny Hall, Forrester Harvey as Herbert Hall, Dudley Diggs as Chief of Detectives. Surprised, I thought he had a name. E. Clive as one of the police constables, Jaffers specifically. Dwight Fryer as the reporter, and Merle Tottenham as Millie. Kicking off on the plot, one snowy night, a stranger, his face swathed in bandages and his eyes obscured by dark goggles, takes a room at the Lion's Head Inn in the English village of Ipping in Sussex. Which, honestly, everything in England sounds made up. The man demands to be left alone. Later, the innkeeper, Mr. Hall, is sent by his wife to evict the stranger after he has made a huge mess in his room while doing research and has fallen behind on his rent. Angered, the stranger throws Mr. Hall down the stairs. Confronted by a policeman and some local civilians, he removes his bandages and goggles, revealing he is in fact invisible. Laughing maniacally, he takes off all of his clothes to make himself completely undetectable and drives off his tormentors before fleeing into the countryside. The stranger is one Dr. Jack Griffin, a chemist who discovered the secret of invisibility while conducting a series of tests involving an obscure drug called monocaine. Flora Cranley, Griffin's fiancée and the daughter of Griffin's employer, Dr. Cranley, becomes distraught over Griffin's long absence. Cranley and his other assistant, Dr. Kemp, search Griffin's empty laboratory, finding only a single note in a cupboard. Cranley became concerned when he reads it. The note has a list of chemicals, including monocaine, which Cranley knows is extremely dangerous. An injection of it drove a dog mad in Germany, which is an extremely specific case. Griffin, it seems, is unaware of this. Cranley deduces that Griffin may have learned about the monocaine in English books printed before the incident had happened that described only its power to bleach things. Which, I'm not even going to get into that. On the evening of his escape from the inn, Griffin turns up at Kemp's house. He forces Kemp to become his visible partner in a plot to dominate the world through a reign of terror, beginning with a few murders here and there, quote unquote. They drive back to the inn to retrieve his notebooks on the invisibility process. Sneaking inside, Griffin finds a police inquiry underway, conducted by an official who believes this is all a hoax. After securing his books, Griffin angrily attacks and kills the officer. Back home, Kemp calls Cranley, asking for help, and then the police. Flora persuades her father to let her come along. In her presence, Griffin becomes more placid and calls her darling. When he realizes Kemp has betrayed him, his first reaction is to get Flora away from danger. After promising Kemp that at 10 o'clock the next night he will murder him, great plan, my man, Griffin escapes and goes on a killing spree. He causes the derailment of a train, resulting in hundreds of deaths, and throws 2 volunteer searchers off of a cliff. The police offer a reward to anyone who can think of a way to catch him. Feeling that Griffin will try to fulfill his promise, the chief detective in charge of the search uses Kemp as bait and devises various clever traps to get a hold of Griffin. Trying to protect Kemp, the police disguise him in a police uniform and let him drive his car away from the house. Griffin, however, is hiding in the back seat of his car, surprising Kemp. He tells Kemp that he was also following him all day while also committing his crimes. This guy's got multitasking down to a T. He overpowers Kemp and ties him to the front seat. Griffin then sends his car down a steep hill and over a cliff where it explodes on impact, killing Kemp inside. A snowstorm then forces Griffin to seek shelter in a barn where he falls asleep. Later, a farmer enters and spots movement in the hay where Griffin is sleeping. He notifies the police, who rush out to the farm and surround the barn. They set fire to the building, which forces Griffin to come out, leaving visible footprints in the snow. The chief detective opens fire, mortally wounding Griffin. He is taken to the hospital where, hours later, a surgeon informs Dr. Cranley that Griffin is dying and is asking to see Flora. On his deathbed, Griffin remorsefully admits to Flora, quote, "I meddled in things that a man must leave alone," unquote. As he dies, his body quickly becomes visible again. Okay, jumping very far forward to a 2020 remake of the film, it is directed by Lee Wanell. It is directed and written by Lee Wanell. Wanell, we go with Wanell. Once again, based on the 1897 novel of the same name. It is its cast is made up of as Elisabeth Moss as Cecilia Cass, Aldous Hodge as James Lanier, Storm Reed as Sydney Lanier, Oliver Jackson Cohen as Adrian Griffin, Harriet Dyer as Emily Cass, and Michael Dorman as Tom Griffin. There's also additional cast members of Renee Lim, Nicholas Hope, Nash Edgerton, and Anthony Brandon Wong. Running into the plot in a completely modern setting, Cecilia Cass is trapped in a violent and controlling relationship with one wealthy optics engineer and businessman, Adrian Griffin, the founder and CEO of the human computer augmentation company Cobalt. One night, Cecilia drugs Adrian with her diazepam, thank you, and escapes his highly secured house with her younger sister Emily's help. Cecilia hides out with her childhood friend, San Francisco police detective James Lanier, and his teenage daughter Sydney. 2 weeks after Cecilia's escape, Adrian seemingly commits suicide and leaves her $5 million. His lawyer brother, Tom, handles the arrangements. Cecilia suspects another presence, however, in her house after several strange events, but James assures her that she is just traumatized and paranoid from her experiences. During a job interview, she finds her work portfolio contents completely removed and then faints. Her doctor says high levels of diazepam were found inside of her system. In her bathroom, she then also finds the same bloody diazepam bottle which she used to drug Adrian. Cecilia, accompanied by James, meets with Tom. She believes that Adrian faked his death and is using his optics expertise to become completely invisible in order to torment her, but this idea is quickly rebuffed. Later, an unseen force hits Sydney, who assumes it was Cecilia. While alone in the house, Cecilia tries various tactics to catch the figure she believes hit Sydney. She finds Adrian's phone up in the attic, on which she immediately receives a text saying, "Surprise." Cecilia then quickly dumps a bucket of paint down the attic to the trapdoor, coating an invisible figure standing on the ladder just inside. A violent struggle ensues, but Cecilia manages to escape. She goes to Adrian's home to investigate his lab, where she finds an additional invisible bodysuit covered in cameras, confirming her suspicions. Right after she hides the suit in their former bedroom's closet, the invisible figure attacks again, so she flees and contacts Emily. The pair meet at a restaurant where the invisible figure slits Emily's throat and places the knife in Cecilia's hand, framing her for murder. While awaiting trial, Cecilia is remanded to a psychiatric hospital where she learns that she is pregnant. Tom offers to get her charges dropped if she agrees to return to him, quote unquote, and raise the child, implying that Tom had helped stage his brother's suicide. He reveals Adrian tampered with her birth control in order to impregnate her. Cecilia refuses the offer and steals a fountain pen from him. That night, she attempts suicide and lures out the invisible figure. When the figure tries to stop her, she stabs him repeatedly with the pen, causing his suit to malfunction. The security team arrives, but the figure incapacitates them before fleeing the hospital, with Cecilia in pursuit. To protect her unborn child, the figure instead threatens to attack those that she loves. Cecilia races to James's house and finds the figure attacking him and Sydney. She shoots the figure to death, but finds Tom in the suit rather than Adrian. Police storm Adrian's house and find him alive, tied up and claiming that he had been a prisoner held by Tom. They conclude that Tom, in fact, had killed Emily as well, but Cecilia believes that Adrian set his brother up as a scapegoat for all of his crimes. To get Adrian's confession, a now exonerated Cecilia meets with him at his house, secretly wearing a wire, while James listens in from a few blocks away. She agrees to mend their relationship, but only if he confesses to killing Emily. Adrian insists that Tom was responsible, but claims that the experience changed his outlook on life and that how he treated her. After Adrian says the word surprise, Cecilia excuses herself to the restroom. Moments later, however, a security camera captures Adrian seemingly slitting his own throat. Cecilia returns and calls 911, apparently distraught. Out of the camera's sight, however, she coldly stares at a dying Adrian and taunts him by returning the word surprise. Cecilia leaves as Adrian dies on the floor. When James arrives, Cecilia confirms what the camera had captured by saying, "I'm okay, he killed himself, he cut his own throat." James sees then the invisible suit inside of her purse, but allows her to leave, pretending that she didn't notice it. Bit of a more powerful ending to that one.
Yes, though it is, the movie's also, I mean, it's certainly more complicated.
Yeah. Not necessarily in a bad way, though.
Oh, no, no mean to imply. But, yeah, we will, go into a, we'll go into a relatively short full circle.
Nice small casts for this one.
So we got a couple here. We had more, but as usual, I sort of whittled it down a bit. We didn't have any for 2020 at all, not even in the extended list. So this is all going to be for the 33, Invisible Man. The first one we've got here is Dwight Frye, of course, who showed up as the reporter in The Invisible Man. We saw him as Fritz in 31's Frankenstein, Renfield in 31's Dracula, and Vilmer Cook in 31's The Maltese Falcon.
That man had a busy year.
Very busy year in 31, and then he took 2 years off and came back for The Invisible Man. Now, I know he was consistently working.
They were able to pump out some films back then, man.
Oh, yeah, they just keep going. Never stop. Next, Henry Travers, who was Dr. Cranley in The Invisible Man, was also Baron Caesarea in 34's Death Takes a Holiday.
Seeing a theme with some of these actors.
Oh, really?
Mainly horror-ish.
Yes.
Or the macabre, at the very least.
Yeah, I guess Death Takes a Holiday is like a dark romantic. I wouldn't even call it a comedy. Whatever.
It's just a goth's dream.
And then I've sort of lumped these together for a very clear theme. But the biggest of them would be Claude Rains, who was the titular Invisible Man, Dr. Griffin, in the film. He was also John Talbot in 1941's The Wolfman.
Nice.
And we also had Harry Stubbs and Forrester Harvey, who both appeared in small roles in The Invisible Man and The Wolfman. So that's three connections we have between those two Universal monster pictures, but not to be outdone. Mae Bruce and Ted Billings both appeared in The Invisible Man and Frankenstein, similarly to Dwight Frye. So Universal monster pictures, sharing the wealth of roles.
Nice tight cast list they got there.
Yes,
and
it's very nice. I know that we've mentioned it before, but The Mummy is the only the original Universal monster feature that we have not covered at this point. Obviously, I mean, that Creature from the Black Lagoon and Bride of Frankenstein fit into that mold as well, but I don't think those really have good excuses for us to cover them necessarily. So I really do think The Mummy would be the last one for our show until we get a Black Lagoon remake or something.
Right.
But that's it for Full Circle.
Fantastic. I'd love a good brief one. But I'll be happy to hear your initial thoughts on the films to allow me a moment of rest. Those are surprisingly more complicated than I realized.
Yes. So these were both very interesting features. I had not seen either of them prior, but I was well aware of both of their individual plots for varying reasons. Not the the details necessarily, but I knew what was going on, to say the least. The real thing that strikes me, I guess, is 2020's The Invisible Man is so interesting in that it just barely skirted by being a complete disaster. Like, I don't know all the production details, but it was being produced during Universal's Dark Pictures franchise. It was going to be in that same vein of the Wolfman movie that we covered, for example. Right. And it had a different director attached.
Yeah, the Dark Universe that was killed stone dead after a single film, essentially. That being The Mummy. Not the good one, I'll remind folks. The one with Tom Cruise.
It did not go well. And like I said, 2020 Invisible Man had a different director. It was put on hiatus. COVID did not help when that eventually came around. Which is funny because, I mean, The Wolfman was like 2011, wasn't it? So,
well, yeah, I don't know if that one was
a decent time.
Yeah, I don't know if that one was necessarily meant to be... Like, they obviously did that as a remake, and they probably would have lumped it in, but I think that was prior to them explicitly saying, oh, we're doing an expanded universe thing. Like, because that was still at the height of, like, when Marvel was doing their thing.
Probably, because I think officially, yeah, the 2017 Mummy would be the only movie that is officially Dark Pictures, I guess. I hadn't really considered that. Because I know they had a bunch of different... I mean, for example, I'm pretty sure there was supposed to be a Bride of Frankenstein, and if that had happened, we'd have something to talk about. But So, anyways, Invisible Man goes on the back burner. COVID happens. It takes forever to do all this, whatever the hell.
It was
And
originally supposed to have
then
Johnny Depp as the titular character.
I have no interest in that.
Yeah,
But
same.
then we get this movie. It's completely devoid of that, and I don't know. It's pretty unique in how it tells its tale. It's not like a remake in the strictest sense. It's a remake in idea alone. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, there's
they
a
sort of
scientist that can make himself invisible. Now what do we do?
he
Like
just
it's that's it.
yeah, like all he shares the last name with the original character, but that's it. Like
Of
they're both
course.
Griffin. Um,
Hmm.
but beyond that, yeah, like I don't know if there are a lot of like various attempts at modernizing various things. For instance, Sherlock Holmes, like we mentioned earlier, like at least I mentioned earlier, um, and in many cases they are to a middling effect, just because a lot of those things don't translate super well. Meanwhile, the Invisible Man as a concept almost works better in this modernized form because it's not just, a Jekyll and Hyde esque, oh, it's a magical chemical because that's what scientists can create or whatever. It's here is a state of the art piece of technology that's actually kind of believable. It's not like, obviously, it's not like, oh, we're making these today, but you look at it, it's this very, because this suit that this guy is wearing whenever it's not operating is just this strange rubberized suit covered in little cameras and everything and like projectors, and it just looks really cool and believable. And so that was the most shocking thing about it for when I first, saw this movie. It's wild that they actually found a way of modernizing it that wasn't stupid.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like the fact that it's more or less realistic. It's realistic in a sense that you could conceive of it, and I know that those are. It's kind of related to experiments that the military has been doing with
Yeah.
quote unquote cloaking technology for years now. So it's sort of based on the reality of those forms of optics, and it's really interesting. But it's the main difference is that the main character of the Invisible Man is Dr. Griffin, but not in the 2020 film. It's really the Elisabeth Moss character, which I will say I enjoyed the 2020 movie for what it's trying to do, but I think it kind of lives or dies on Elisabeth Moss's performance. If they had
Yeah.
gotten anyone with even an iota less acting talent than what she brings to the table, I don't think this idea would have worked.
Oh, absolutely. I think Elizabeth Moss is probably one of the most underrated actresses of our day. Um, just the sheer stress that she's able to put on display, and then also the fact that she's able to turn it right around and into like calculated rage when it gets right down to it. Like this isn't a helpless character, and she's able to portray that. In so many other cases, in so many cases we've seen with horror movies where we have like the main character starts off helpless and then becomes brave and strong. It oftentimes comes across as kind of quaint or kind of bullshit in some cases. Meanwhile, throughout this entire thing, Elizabeth Moss is showing this character is only helpless because it's a fucking insane situation she's been thrown into. She is otherwise doing everything in her power to not be helpless. And it's actually working. Like she's competent. It's just that she's up against insane odds. And that's believable. That's understandable. It's like I love it. And then she finally is able to get the one up in the end. And it feels earned. It feels like after everything she's done, she's actually managed to get to this point that, yeah, okay, yeah, she gets the win. She deserves that one.
Mm-hmm. Now, on a slightly altered note, to go to the 33 Invisible
Yes.
Man, I really loved the 33 Invisible Man as well because I knew the basic beats of the story, but I did not know that boiled down to its essentials, it is a crazy asshole commits crimes.
Yeah, it's
That
great.
is all the movie is, and I love it. It's great.
It's fantastic. It
It's
is it's as close to a Jekyll and Hyde story done well as we've ever seen, I think. Because people have tried to do variations of Jekyll and Hyde, and they've always been so all over the place to me, like compared to like the original text. This is actually just, hey, mad scientist, he's a jackass. Let's have fun with that. And that's just what it is. It's fantastic. And like I said, like it literally just goes just shy of it just in the end going, what has science done? And it's just like the answer to that is science has created a lunatic dude who just wanted to have the time of his life. I cannot believe that genuinely there is a sequence in which this man is talking about ruling the world through terror by being one dude who's invisible. And you know what? I believe him. I fully believed him. I think he could have. Like
Yeah,
this
I think he
guy.
could do it.
Yeah. It's wild. It's wild wanting to root for this character despite he is so unironically a bastard. Like there are few villains we see that are ever this much of like, I am completely the worst dick in the world and I don't care. It's like, all right, good
And
for
he,
you.
yeah, he's having fun, which is the great thing about it. Like he's having fun with it, and that's a big distinction between these two movies as well that you got to consider is that the Invisible Man titling of 2020 is more so not to reflect the character, but to reflect the situation. Because again, the main character of the movie is Elisabeth Moss, and she's
Right. It's
trapped in
more
a situation where she's being tormented by a force that she can't understand. Science isn't the villain necessarily. It's this guy who clearly had problems before he was able to figure out this invisible technology. Whereas in 33, it is the what is science wrought, because the whole deal is this chemical he's injecting into himself is making him go insane
yeah.
while he is also invisible.
Yeah.
He was not like this before.
Yeah, he was a pretty normal dude and then all of a sudden it's like, "Whoa, I'm going crazy." And it's yeah, I also love just how competent he is up until the very end. Like he's able to get away with all of this crap despite him being a lunatic. He's able to just like the police come knocking after like, he's just been kind of he's been mucking up his room and he hasn't been paying rent. His immediate first response to this is, "Look at me. I'm straight up invisible and now I'm going to beat all of your asses." Like it's like this guy went from 0 to 100. Okay, he went from like 50 to 100 real quick. It's just
Definitely.
he is able to command every scene he's in, despite the fact that yes, in many cases you simply cannot see him. Like even when he's introduced, he straight up he does the classic thing of stranger walks into a bar in the middle of the night and everyone goes dead silent at his presence. It's like this man is a dramaticist and it's amazing.
And there is something to say about, I guess this might seem like slight tangent, but it is related. A slight negative I have for the 2020 movie, and it's not a negative in the execution, it's just a negative in personal taste, is given the fact that it is a story about this woman being gaslit and harassed and being made to seem like she is crazy, we fall into the generalized, no one believes this woman. And so, for the vast majority of the movie, it is just it's paranoia versus what may or may not be there. And she tries to explain it to people, and they're like, "No, you're crazy," or he's trying to make you feel crazy, which is a good thing because like his brother, for example, even if he's on his side in the end, sort of relates like, yeah, he's a gaslighter. He's trying to make you feel like you're insane, and he's succeeding, which is the whole point. I do more so appreciate the fact I mentioned this in Death Takes a Holiday too, I think, from the same time, that episode. But I just appreciate the fact that it's like, okay, nope, this is a given fact. Like 25 minutes into the movie, we all know what's going on. How are we going to deal with this? This man is loose and wreaking havoc. He is invisible. We don't know what to do. We get to see townspeople and the police like set up room scans where they hold up a net and just walk in a straight line across the room. Like, okay, he's not here. We can talk now. Like, I don't know. I think that's very.
Yeah.
I think that's intriguing. Whenever we can get ideas like that, because again, not necessarily the movie's fault, the 2020 movie's fault. It's more so a taste thing. I just think that we have a large influx of these type of horror movies where it's no one will believe me about the monster until it's too late.
Right, yeah.
Thankfully, the theming of the 2020 movie at least lends itself to that idea.
Yeah,
the
it
movie
kind of
is
earns
built
it.
around it, so it's not hackneyed. It's just, it's not to my personal taste, but I do agree that the movie, it earns it.
Right. It's
Least.
not an idiot plot. It's like
Yes.
it's like, in any other circumstances of like, oh, there's a crazy monster and crazy shit is happening, anyone not believing the main character would be an idiot. Whereas in this one it's all meant to be extremely grounded feeling, and yeah, the whole point of it's meant to be like, oh no, I don't want her to be believed, so I'm going to keep doing wacky shit. I will go back to what you were talking about, like when they were doing like the room scan thing with the net, and how we don't necessarily see that sort of thing anymore. I think it's kind of just interesting to think about because I also thought about going back to the original War of the Worlds of all things, where they go on that extended kind of diatribe talking about like how the aliens' eyes work and like how they're studying their camera technology and like how they have all these things. There would seem to be for a long period of time in cinema, especially with sci-fi, this desire to kind of show how people would actually react in this situation. Like in the situation of, yeah, we're dealing with a guy who can be invisible. We got to, how would someone confirm they're actually alone in the room? And we get to see that process of, okay, they literally just have to do a big netting scan to be able to just confirm that there's nothing in the way. And, similar thing with the War of the Worlds, where it's like, okay, how do these people react? Okay, well, we're studying an alien species. We're having to go through all these different things. And I do appreciate that when we see them, and it does also make sense that that fell out of fashion because at a certain point, I'm sure if the style of invisibility that is shown in the 2020 version was used in the 1930s one, that being a suit that can bend light, there would be some extended period, like when she finds the suit in the basement, there'd be some extended period of them studying it and being like, this is how it works, and like, how is this possible, and all these different things. Um, but I'm appreciative of the fact that we didn't have that in the 2020 version because it didn't need it. It explained it just enough for us to understand what was going on and then wanted to keep doing its own theming. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm good with that. And I am glad that each film did its own thing with the premise on hand, basically. Like, not even necessarily the premise, just the act of invisibility itself. Like, we have the whole thing of talking about monocaine and chemicals and everything, which is almost straight ripped from Jekyll and Hyde, I should say, but not necessarily a bad thing. It just shows that H.G. Wells definitely read Jekyll and Hyde. If he didn't also read it, that may have also been him. I can't remember.
Oh, you mean write it? That's
Yeah,
a good question.
I don't think he did. But anyway, that was a very popular thing back then with early sci-fi, especially sci-fi horror of like, you know, the scientist finds this special like chemical that's able to do wild and crazy things. Um, but anyway, it's I do like the differences that they decide to go in with each of these, and I think it's very interesting seeing the shift of that between these two because it's never been clearer in this cases of like whenever we do remakes. This might be kind of one of the more pristine instances of remakes we've ever had, simply for the fact of both movies do what they're doing extremely well, despite the fact that they are in essence completely unrelated to each other, only other outside of basic premises.
The most basic print, like
Yes,
to
the
a fault.
title,
Like the
the title
story,
basically.
the story itself has nothing to do with one another. And also, fun fact: Jekyll and Hyde was written by Robert Louis Stevenson, who also, of
Yep.
course, wrote Treasure Island. Go listen to our Treasure Island episode from earlier this year.
Yes, yeah. I for some reason like I conflated the two, but yeah, that was Stevenson. But yeah, that was a
Hooray!
surprisingly popular thing back then. Of mystery chemical is able to do all these wild and crazy things.
Yes. Well, also just like the general science, like this is science. Is it? Is what
Yeah,
you're doing science? You're just pouring things in a beaker and injecting it into your skin. I know I've mentioned it on the show before, but it really just reminds me of The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, which is supposed to be a riff on B science fiction horror movies, and the main male lead character in the movie just keeps saying his job title is scientist
oh yeah.
because that's what most of those movies of the 50s and 60s, even like this is the 30s, it's just like, yeah, I'm a scientist, I do science. But I love that it's just, yeah, I mean, the audience doesn't understand it, so we can just say anything and they'll have to believe it.
I like how it's been translated nowadays into with the modern movie. It's instead of oh I'm a scientist, it's oh I'm rich. It's like that's basically it with the modern version, like Adrian as a character, which um I would love to be able to talk about the comparison between these two villains because both of these villains are great. I'm just gonna say both of the titular Invisible Men.
Hmm.
Like
It's,
obviously we've talked about
it's,
Claude Rains as Jack Griffin, but I also think Adrian Griffin, who was played by sorry, um, Oliver Jackson Cohen. I think both of these guys are great in what they were doing.
I, I am interested to hear more of your take on the new Dr. Griffin because I think he does sort of the smarmy gaslighty sort of appearance very well. It's just we don't really get that until like the last 10 minutes of the movie. Most of the
Yes.
movie he's silent because he's, again, compared to the 33 one, this guy's stalking around and trying to convince everyone that this woman's crazy, and she's the only person that has any idea that he's there. So he rarely says anything. I think
Right.
he has like 2 lines of dialogue in the whole fucking movie until the police scene, because at that point it's just like, okay, well, time to go on a killing spree. Whereas in 33, he's laughing, he's talking to everybody, because again, everyone knows he's there. He's like, okay, well, who gives a shit? I'm just gonna go batshit crazy. I think the guy in 2020 does a good job. He just doesn't get a lot of play.
That is true. Yeah, he's basically all of his on-screen character is there at the very end. Um, but I think also just the fact of it's a similar thing of he feels like he has a commanding presence even when he's not on screen, which like even like when he's literally on screen but you can't see him. Um, I think it does a lot of show don't tell with his character. I feel like because anyone who's willing and able to do all the shit that he's doing, like the fact that there are moments where she's just standing in the room by herself, which by the way the camera shots in these are great, like that idea of like she's uncentered so it feels like there's a presence in the room even though there might not be, and it's just it fully plays into it. I love it. um but just the idea of he's able to do all of these things and has the willpower and drive to do them, I think says so much about his character that he at times feels even crazier than the 1933 guy. Because he didn't have chemicals or anything making him crazy. This guy was just like that. This guy is living full power fantasy at all times, and he's doing it extremely competently. And that's terrifying. Like the fact that he's able to have this much discipline and getting it all done is probably the scariest part about his character, and I think that kind of builds his character more than anything else. And so it's despite the fact that we see so little of him and hear so little of him, it still lends itself to the fact that yeah, okay, this guy's a fucking nutcase, and he's an extremely powerful nutcase, and that's cool as hell. So, and I do still love Dr. Jack Griffin in the original, but at a certain point I was kind of like, all right, man, like you can rein it in just a touch, right? Like you're
No,
invisible.
he's poisoned. He
True, yeah.
his mind has been poisoned. He can't reel it in until he
True.
sees his beautiful babe.
Oh my god, yeah. That I will say, God, I hated that part of earlier like sci-fi films and everything of like the kind of the basically the King Kong thing of like beauty soothe the savage beast or whatever. It's such an annoying trope.
It's another thing I'll say. And this is a tangent. This has nothing to do with what we were talking about. I was just thinking about it. One thing, again, I feel like a lot of my negatives for 2020 aren't a negative for the movie itself, but either for taste or for just the current state of film. But I think that I think it looks fine for the most part, and the effects that they do for the invisibility are just CGI, but they're done fine enough because most of it is just green screen and then removing the person that is doing the green screen to make it look like it's invisible.
Yeah.
There's real sets and real props and everything, so
Yeah, it
at the
should be
very
said
least
also.
it's not abysmal to look like
Yeah,
or
it should
to
be
look
said
at.
also. This movie was only $7 million budget. Like this was
Very
tiny for a
cheap.
budget, and it was incredible with what they did with it.
Um Compared to 1933's effects, I feel dumb. Because I know how they did some of that, but there are some of those shots where I'm like, how they do that?
Yeah, no,
How did
the
they do that?
30s. Yeah, the 30s do baffle me, like with some of the effects they're able to pull off. I will say that I give full props to the effects in the 1933 film because it deserves it.
They're great. There's some things where I'm like, okay, well that's like double exposure, or like there's just wires for that, obviously, but other times I'm like, yeah, I have no idea how they're doing that, and it's fucking amazing.
Even the
Just
scene where
take me away.
even just the scene where we first see him removing his bandages, like the first time we see that, I'm like, whoa, how the fuck they pull that off? And I'm sure there's something very straightforward with it, but still.
Yeah, it's like I'm getting lost in a movie. I'm not a visual effects guy. Just let me get lost in the movie.
I will say though, the scene in the 2021 where she dumps the paint on him in the attic doorway, that shit gets me every time. Like that is so instantly stunning, and I think that's probably one of the most famous shots from the film as a result.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's the first
it's
time you see him at all, too,
right,
so it has more impact.
and it's such a simple, quick scene, and it's done so effectively. I love it to death.
This is funny. I feel like we're almost. I'm running out of things to say. Strangely enough, I feel like we're in an opposite situation where it's not like shooting fish in a barrel. I
Yeah,
think that these are both very, very good films for different decades, and I'm
yeah.
having a hard time actually comparing them because, again, I sound like a broken record. Most of it's just coming down to taste, really.
It really is, which is the problem. And it's not even a thing of like, oh, one thing didn't age well, the other one didn't like it, like was a bit too stuck in its roots or that sort of thing. The 33 version feels very apt for the time it was made in. Like this is a straight up mad scientist flick that like kind of at the height of those films being made and like universal horrors in general, and it's putting all of its effects to like to its heights. Its story isn't necessarily anything deep, but none of these universal monster movies really were. And for the most part, also they're all based off of existing properties. So um, and so that didn't feel nothing felt truly out of place as a film. Obviously, things didn't haven't aged the same way nowadays, and so there's certain parts that are just kind of like, yeah, I'm just not a big fan of that. But again, like you said, that's what taste. And then the 2021, despite there being some points where I was like, yeah, this can get a little dull at times, and it feels like I'm not sure where we're trying to go, but it is still bringing such an effective set of tone and messages with what they're going for, despite the fact that it's based off a very simple premise of what if there was a dude that was invisible. It's just like, yeah, how would that be the case in a modern situation? How would it be of this idea of a power fantasy between a man and a woman? It's like, yeah, that's shockingly and uncomfortably apt for nowadays, isn't it? Um, and
Hmm.
it just, God, it's difficult here. And I'm coming down to the point of just comparing folks or just like comparing beats of the story. And I don't know. I gotta say, if I gotta give something to the third, like if there's something I gotta be kind of down on for the 33 version, I thought the ending kind of felt like eh. It just felt kind of weird that that's where it decided to end up. After all the craziness and the mass murder, it ends with him getting a shot and then dying comfortably in a hospital bed, basically like holding the hand of his lover. It's like I don't feel like he earned that. This guy's a nutcase. He should have died in the snow.
Well, I think that it's just of the time in a way that
Yeah,
a
I
lot of
know.
movies did. A lot of movies did the "'twas beauty killed the beast" thing, because if it hadn't been for his girl, he probably would have gotten close to conquering the world, or at least conquering this English hamlet. Like,
Yeah,
I think that he could have gone pretty far, but
yeah.
the
This man really
woman
was gonna
leads to
go
his
from.
downfall.
This man really was trying to go from Sussex to the whole wide world. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And again, he probably could have. It's like, man,
He could have. He could have done it. And I mean,
I would have loved to have seen a
in
sequel to
keeping.
this where he starts like giving other people injections and he just has an army of invisible men.
Well, I will tell you, I was literally. It's hilarious you brought that up, because I was literally about to say,
Oh
in
my god.
keeping with the series of the time, there are a lot of Invisible Man movies that Universal made following this 33 feature.
Really?
The Invisible Man Returns, which I think has his son. The Invisible Woman, get sexy with it.
Ooh.
In, Invisible Agent, which he goes up against the Nazis. So
Okay, that just sounds fun.
there's
That
that.
just sounds hilarious.
He's for the Allies. The Invisible Man's Revenge from 44, which could be a bit of a darker tone. And then, of course, as you are one to do, Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man.
And they really did meet everybody.
They met everybody. I I probably mentioned it in the episode that we did on that movie, but it's like Francis Ford Coppola made Godfather 1 and 2, and when he was asked about Part 3, he said the only logical film to follow up Godfather Part 2 would be Abbott and Costello Meet the Godfather.
Yeah. Wish he had kept to that.
Yeah. What made him change his mind? Hmm.
Money. Uh, yeah, it's and I'm honestly I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do a follow up with the 2020 version. Like technically, she could be the Invisible Woman. She was the Invisible Woman very briefly at the end of there. Um, but I don't know. I kind of hope they don't. I think it's. I'm very glad that they decided not to do the Dark Universe thing and they decided screw it. Let's let a smaller director do this with a smaller cast and just do their own standalone thing. Which, incidentally, this director, a lot of shit that I actually quite like. He's also the guy behind. There's a 2018 film Upgrade, which is like very sci-fi, where it's this guy has like a chip in his head that's able to like control him and all these things. Honestly, pretty interesting. Um, which apparently might have some subtle nods to it in this movie. Apparently, the company that the main villain works for, Cobalt, is the same company in this sci-fi movie Upgrade. Um, but also coming up next year, he's also making the next Wolfman remake. So
Yes, which I was, again, you beat me to it. I was going to bring that up in talking about the Dark Universe stuff,
yeah,
because I have been getting a lot of trailers for the Wolfman in the theaters when I go. And it's reminding me a lot of the Invisible Man movie that I just watched. Not necessarily in terms of quality, but in terms of like, oh, this is like a completely different Wolfman story than what we're used to, especially just having done an episode on it last year.
Yeah. But I'm actually very
So
excited for that.
I have no idea where it's gonna go. It also subscribes to the. I love the fact that since I go to the movies more and more often, and I actually engage with more and more trailers because I am forced to sit through them. I pick up on the eras of trailers that we go through because as soon as someone grabs a hold of some little nugget of an idea, everyone else in the other marketing departments at the other studios also latches onto it.
Yeah.
And the new idea right now is that while scenes from the movie are playing, bits and pieces of the title fade in.
Which,
And the Wolfman is the most recent offender of that. It was cool for a while, but again, I'm at the movies constantly. It seems like every fucking movie is doing this. I'm like, okay, stop. I'm done.
well, I'm pretty
People are
sure.
predictable.
I'm pretty sure the original that did that was Alien, and that fell off for a while. It didn't come back until I think Prometheus came back online which is obviously another part of the Alien universe. Um,
Right.
and I
And
think
that's fine
after
because
that
that's
it picked
just an
back up.
idea. It's just that as studios, we're creatively bankrupt. So again, we latch
Yeah.
onto one another's ideas. Nothing is truly original. But now it's like literally every I Long Legs and Alien Romulus, which at least is a part of that same franchise, and like everything I'm seeing.
Yeah. Which it's honestly it's effective. I'll give it that. Alien was ahead of its time when it came to that. It's just
Ahead
kind of
of
the
its
idea of
time,
like,
yes.
it feels like you're kind of being like overstimulated with all the everything going on. I think that's kind of the point. Um, but yeah, that is interesting to take note of.
I just wish people would be more creative is the thing. Again, I don't think that's bad that they're doing that. It's just when you watch 6 trailers in a row and each one of them does the exact same thing and they're all from different studios, you just throw up your hands and you're like, what the fuck are we doing?
Right.
What are we doing?
Right.
All I want is creativity. But I get so I was gonna take us into quote unquote question land, even though I don't necessarily have a question. I was just gonna bring up a topic. But
Right. I guess we should probably give our firm answers though for which one we
exactly.
prefer.
Yeah, you again, third time in a row, you've beat me to the punch because I'm very
Sorry.
slow tonight for some reason. No, that's fine. But I think ultimately both of these are a lot of fun in a way that
Yeah.
I would not mind rewatching either of them if they
Mhm.
were on or if I had the opportunity. I think they're both good, and for the pacing and 30s missteps that the original makes, it makes up for in runtime alone.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the
Seriously.
2020 is at least interesting enough, and like I mentioned like 30 minutes ago, Elisabeth Moss fucking carries that thing on her back. So
Oh my god.
ultimately, I think I prefer the 33 mainly because of the effects work and how
Mhm.
stunning it is to me. Like I can't get enough of watching that, and since it's the main character, you get to see a lot of like cool effect shots while you're watching the movie, and it just still blows me away. But it is a very close race in my mind, and in the end, it just comes down to taste. It comes down to personal taste. Nothing to do with quality, really.
Yeah. And I'm pretty much in the same boat, but I will say I do think I ultimately lean towards the remake. I think the 2021 I think just irks out for me simply because I just love how much they're able to do with so little. Like the premise of the movie is the title. That's it. Like that's the whole plot you got right there. And they were able to turn that into something that's like modern and poignant and meaningful and scary more than anything. It is scary. Like there are moments in this that genuinely got me to jump. And that's hard to do nowadays. Like, even with me as averse to straight up horror as I am, that is still impressive all the same. And it's so cool with what they're able to do with it, and I just think it's done so somehow both complicated but also extremely simply. Of crazy rich dude with an invisibility suit, he has issues. It's like, cool, let's work with that. um but again, like you said, it is a very close race though. The 30s 1933 one is so fun. I think the best way I think I could feel about it is I'd love to rewatch the 1933 one with folks, with like friends. It'd be great just to rewatch this just for the movie night. um I'd love to get.
Watch Invisible Agent.
Yeah, true. That'd be great. Um, we could pick. We need to because we always do a poll of like between three movies. We need to do the invisible. We need to do three of the Invisible Man sequels. Just,
Just
since
the
there's like
sequels from the 30s. That sounds great.
yeah. Um, But yeah, I'd love to watch 33 with people. I think the 2021 is pretty well done as a solo experience. I think it's a standalone thing of, yeah, this is freaky, and I think that's all it needs. I don't necessarily need company for that one. If anything, it might be kind of uncomfortable if I watch it with really anyone else because, yeah, it's stressful and also kind of uncomfortably close to real world issues. So, might be kind of a difficult thing to watch with the parents. Not for any particular reason. It's just like, yeah, no,
Oh,
this
yes.
is just very real. Like, not least of which are the fact of several on-screen staged suicides by throat slitting. It's just not great.
Oh, boy.
But hey, it's still good. I still think it just barely irks out for me. But again, both these movies, fantastic, honestly. I'm so glad we got
Right.
one. It's been a minute since we've had two that were just genuinely great in comparison to each other.
Yeah, and not for lack of trying necessarily. So
Right.
I'm happy about that. um, so going into this, like I said, it's not really a question, more so a topic of discussion because we've been talking about Universal's Dark Universe movement.
Right.
And I did a little bit of research and digging on this, and the Dark Universe actually has a pretty complicated history, and it had multiple stops and starts.
Really.
Um, the first one being all the way back in the early aughts with Van Helsing, if you remember that one.
Oh God, yeah, I do.
That's the one that I didn't watch for the longest time because I was actually in theaters for it. I was obviously a lot younger, but I was in theaters for it, and the movie literally shut off in the first 10 minutes because the projector broke, and we just had to leave the theater, and we got
Wow.
refunds. And that was
That's
my Van Helsing story for the longest time. But
that's wild.
so I didn't watch it for a while because I was like, okay, well, whatever. I didn't get to watch Van Helsing. The second attempted launch was The Wolfman that we watched from 2011. Uh, that was their second quote unquote false start. The third one was Dracula Untold from 2014, which
Oh
I
my
have not
God,
seen, but
yeah.
I've heard pretty bad
I
things about.
I actually have seen it. It's bad. It is a bad film. I appreciate it
Okay.
for more than it deserves. It's kind of just silly. It's actually trying to mix both the popularized story of Dracula with like the actual story of Vlad Tepes, like the guy that's actually Dracula's
Yeah.
based on. And it's like it's an admirable effort, if nothing else. But otherwise, yeah, no, it's a bad movie.
And the last real Dark Universe attempt was 2017 with the Mummy, and they're obviously still using the branding of the Dark Universe just for their monster features, and they're moving in a new direction with the Invisible Man and the upcoming Wolfman, both by Wannell. So they're not like giving up on these ideas, but
Mhm.
it's kind of fascinating that they just can't seem to get this idea right, and it's it's like it's because they're trying to start like an MCU thing at this point.
Yeah,
Like I don't even know what that would look like, honestly.
I'm hoping beyond hope that because of how they've shifted and how they're kind of going the Blumhouse model of doing a smaller scale thing and just doing it very well. Because Dracula Untold, Jekyll and Hyde, not Jekyll and Hyde, sorry, the Mummy, um, and obviously Van Helsing, they all had this tendency to try to just go big and massive, like all these grand scale things. Like we're seeing, like in the Dracula Untold, we're seeing like armies and shit going against each other, and like there's a whole scene where he creates an army of vampires at the end, and it's crazy and all these things, and it's all so over the top that at a certain point it just becomes a snooze fest. Whereas the point and the joy and the enjoyment that comes from these Universal monster movies was the fact that they were small. Like they weren't these grand tales, you know, even with like Dracula and things, it kept it pretty tight knit. Like as we've seen in all the various, you know, in all the things we've watched up to this point, like even Frankenstein, that's the probably the biggest one I can think of, and that's just because they have a bunch of villagers coming out to kill him, and even that, it's not that much. And so, I think because that they're going to this tighter model, I think they're actually going to get a lot better of a return on investment. So because yeah, we don't have to worry about all this crazy over the top shit like that Marvel's been doing for years and has very quickly already burned out on. We're just having some fun shit with some crazy monsters. It's like that's all it needs to be.
So I guess to sort of pivot into a form of a question,
Sure.
having seen 2020's The Invisible Man, and then we're getting the oh
Wolfman.
my god, the Wolfman soon. Yes, thank you. Um, what would be the next Universal monster film that you would like to see in this sort of style? If they
I
continue on this track,
I desperately want there to be a Frankenstein that's actually accurate to the book. There has never really been a Frankenstein that's actually kept it one to one with the book. And the story is very different from all the various versions we've seen popularized. It's like, not least of which for the fact that Frankenstein's monster doesn't look monstrous. He looks creepy, but he is otherwise built to be like beautiful, basically. He's meant to be like this remade Adonis. And beyond that, it's a story about him finding his place in the world and like his tormented relationship with his creator slash father. Like there's whole like allegories to like Paradise Lost and all these different things. And it's an incredibly rich story. And I desperately wish someone would do something with that. It would be better if it was done to like a limited series, like if you did like 4 episodes an hour long each. I think that could tell the story very well. And I wish someone would do it because I think it deserves to be remade fully because it's a very poignant story. It's not just about like, oh, this deranged monster wants to find love. No, it's a living creature that is forced to recognize the fact that it's basically a monster and is able to fully reason with that, is having to come to grips with reality. It's also as much a story about Dr. Frankenstein himself as well, of him being basically a neglectful father. Which, by the way, he's also not a doctor. He's a doctor. He's a doctorate student, and he never finishes. He just builds his man and then fucks off. Um, so I do think that it just needs to be told properly because between that and Jekyll and Hyde, those two stories have just been butchered by modern interpretations to the point where it's like, what's even the point? Like these are such cool stories. There's a reason they stuck out so distinctly when they were first written, and the idea of like, I don't know, like I wish someone would do Frankenstein right because it's one of my favorite stories.
we
And
need we
yeah,
need Junji Ito to adapt his Frankenstein manga.
oh my god, that'd be incredible. It'd be, yeah, I actually think he would do really well with that. He would need to be reined in just a touch, but I think he could do it.
Yeah, I mean the manga version of Frankenstein that Junji Ito did is
Okay,
very good, and it's
I did not
very
know that
close.
that was a thing. I thought you just meant like him making him do a new interpretation. He made it into manga of this.
Oh no, yeah, his manga of it is years old at this point, and it's very
Oh,
beautiful, and it's very close to the original book as well. I was saying that we need him to get on board with the studio to properly adapt his manga into like a feature or something, and
God.
actually give the studio money so that the project looks good.
Oh yeah, Uzumaki.
I like the first episode, and the rest of the series was mid. Yeah.
Oh god,
Um,
there's so much
but
potential.
anyways, no, that's a very good manga. I was surprised you weren't aware of it. You should read that for
I've
sure.
never really gotten into too much manga, but funnily enough, the what little manga I've consumed has basically just been Junji Ito. So yeah, no, that's I gotta find some of that somewhere.
There you go. Beautiful. I have a couple of hardback collections of his. I mean,
Yeah,
he's not the only manga guy that I have books of, but I do have some of his.
I think I read all of Uzumaki like in one evening, and that fucked me up for a couple of days. Okay. But
Oh,
yeah, I think yeah. But to answer your question, Frankenstein. Okay, that's the one I want to be done. The one I think that'll be done next. I don't know. I see we've been having kind of a kick into werewolves lately, so I don't know if they necessarily will go back to try and do Dracula, just since that's been done to death. But that'd be interesting to see if they try to do a creature from the Black Lagoon. That'd be a wild card if nothing else.
see, that was my main one. But if you'll remember, just a couple of months ago, there was a press release that was like, "Hey, we're talking with James Wan about remaking Creature of the Black Lagoon." So I was like, "Okay,
Oh,
well,
okay.
maybe they are in talks to do that right now with the fucking Saw guy of all people."
I
Um,
mean, honestly, depends on which Saw we're talking about, but that could be good.
but yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Creature from the Black Lagoon. We could go really hard into Hunchback territory because we have not had a Hunchback adaptation in quite a while. That
Wait,
would be
like
interesting.
as in of Notre Dame?
Yes,
Is that a
I think that would
Universal
be
monster?
interesting. Yeah, in the same way that Frankenstein and Dracula are, they didn't create them, but there were a number of Lon Chaney, Notre Dame, whatevers.
Oh, I didn't know that actually.
Yeah. And as far as the Dracula thing is concerned, I fucking hope not. I would be pissed if after Wolfman
Yeah.
they're like, okay, new Dracula. Just because in the past 2 years, we have gotten Renfield, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and Abigail, which is not a Dracula movie, but it is a vampire movie, and all three of those Universal.
Also,
What
it
in
does
the
need to be
fuck?
it does need to be said that there is the Nosferatu movie coming out soon as well, which is based on its history
I am
was
looking
supposed to
forward
be
to
a
that.
Nosferatu was supposed the original was supposed to be a Dracula movie, but the director slash writer couldn't get the rights to Dracula, so they just made the character name something else. That's literally it.
Which is fine. Nosferatu, as it stands, is a classic.
Oh, for sure.
What's the F.W. Murnau? You know, he does the fun German expressionism with all the crooked buildings and shit. I
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
big
I
time.
like that movie, and I am looking forward to the new Nosferatu too. Thankfully, that is not a Universal movie, so it's not like they're dipping their hands for a fourth time in less than 2 years
Yeah, goodness
into that
gracious.
bucket. But
Yeah,
anyways, yeah. So Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Take your pick, Universal. Make us proud.
pull a wild card and do another fucking Phantom of the Opera. I know that's not really Universal, but it's similar vein.
That was a Universal.
Son of a
Although,
bitch.
yeah, I think Phantom of the Opera is burned at this point. I don't think we can get an earnest Phantom adaptation that isn't related to the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical anymore.
To be fair, it is now off
I think
Broadway,
that is.
so
Is it? Okay.
yeah, it finally had
I think
it
that's
had its final run. I think last year. Like it's the longest running Broadway play in history.
shit.
Yeah, no,
I
it's
feel
officially
like
off Broadway.
I feel like the musical has poisoned the well of public consciousness on that story. But maybe we can get a French adaptation of that isn't a musical. We'll see.
That'd be cool. It's an interesting concept, and the musicals, if I'm honest.
It
Uh,
has like two good songs.
yeah, true.
Anyways,
Yeah,
that was a long conversation. I'm glad it was a long conversation.
this was good. I enjoyed this.
Get to dive into the deep end on the Universal monsters, and hey, will we do the Mummy next year? Who knows?
Probably we want to get these wrapped up.
We're trying to meet quota.
It'd be great to do the Brendan Fraser one.
I guess technically, if we wanted to go for completion's sake, we could compare the Hunchback to something. Maybe we'll do that'll be a Disney one. We'll do
Oh yeah, that'll
the
be our
Hunchback.
that'll be our Disney one for next year.
Great.
Jesus,
Oh,
it
but
never
I
ends.
got nothing else.
Nope, same.
Nope,
You
never.
can, you can roll into socials if you like.
I forgot about socials. So go ahead and follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on things like Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker, Podbay, Podomatic, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube. We are hosted on Spotify for podcasters, though. Thank you. Go ahead and send us an email, theyremadeit@gmail.com, with suggestions for future episodes, thoughts on the podcast, whether they be positive or negative, or if you just want to say hi, because that's always great to hear. And follow us on X/Twitter and Bluesky at It Remade and They Remade It. They remade it.bluesky.social, respectively, for updates on when episodes are going live, potential episodes that we might do in the future, full circle diagrams that I put together regarding folks that we have covered on the podcast more than once, and, posters, promo art, video, and things for what we have been playing, watching, reading, engaging with in the interim between episodes. And that is it for socials.
And believe it or not, I'm slowly, progressively, maybe potentially almost going to be a bit more active on Blue Sky, just because that's, I haven't really done a social media for a while, and that one seems surprisingly unproblematic compared to the other options right now. So, yeah, I might.
As of right now.
Yeah, as of right now, knocking on wood, obviously. But, hopefully trying to be a bit more active on there, so I'll actually, do things with what this podcast that I've been a part of for, what is it, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years?
Fifth anniversary, or wait, 2014? Not 2014, 2018.
Yeah, I was about to say, whoa, man. I don't know if had we met yet at that point.
2014? Yeah, we met very briefly. We didn't really hang out a lot until early 2015, but we met because we were on the same floor.
That's true. Yeah, it was the second half. So, fair.
Yeah. But yeah, so we started early 2018, so we're just barely past the 6-year mark. 6.5.
Damnation. But yeah, I'll hopefully be trying to do that a bit more if truly my complete social ineptitude will allow me. I'm just like, anytime I get onto social media and I just see one bad take, I'm like, I need to take a break and go to the country for about 3 weeks.
Oh my lord.
I don't. I can't
I
afford that, but I would like to.
I don't hold it against you. I understand completely.
But hey, thank God there's no major socioeconomic political events coming up in recent weeks that might make things even more polarized. Ha 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 ha.
Oh yes, this will not be. This won't be dated by the time the next episode comes out for sure.
It's gonna. Oh God, I think I need to have a lie down. As always, I am your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
I hope you've had a wonderful Halloween season, and before the true horrors have begun.
Boo!
He's invisible, that's what's the matter with him. If he gets the rest of them clothes off, we'll never catch him in 1,000 years. Come on.
They've asked for it, the country bumpkins. This'll give them a bit of a shock. Something to write home about. A nice bedtime story for the kids, too, if they want it.
Put the handcuffs on. How can I handcuff a blooming shirt?